So good afternoon to all of you. Such a joy to be here today. And I would like to thank the project director of the Bihar Museum Biennale, Alka, Pande, for inviting all of us here. It's really a delight. I remember, that last year we were planning to go to Bihar, but we are now virtually in Bihar and we hope to come to Patna soon, after this pandemic is over. Thanks, Abhay, for being here with us.
Thank you.
Thanks also, Javier from Madrid. I'm looking forward
Thanks.
really to this panel because we are going to discuss a question which is, I think, it's a highly relevant one, and that's a question of perception of art, a question that touches the universality of art as a common experience of humankind. It is art universal, or rather shaped and molded by individual, cultural, political, social, gender, and racial contexts? The question is even more interesting from an Indian point of view, because India has the rare distinction of having presented to the world a subjective theory of aesthetic perception, which aims at the same time at the universality of aesthetic feeling. I refer to the theory of rasa or aesthetic delight, which explains with a wealth of details how a common sentiment is transmuted into an aesthetic experience, where even the feeling of sorrow, karuna, or of terror, bhayanak, becomes delightful, because it turns a common sentiment into an object of aesthetic enjoyment. This will perhaps explain why a Westerner enjoys Indian music, or why an Indian is able to recognize the genius of a Spanish painter like Velázquez. I am really thrilled to count in this session with three outstanding speakers. Abhay Sardesai will address the idea of interpretation and meaning making as a way of making one's perception and appreciation of artworks visible and legible. He will talk of criticism in this context, as he has been involved in shaping the discourse around art as the editor of Art India for the last 19 years. Javier Barón of the Prado Museum in Madrid will talk about one exceptional Spanish painter, Velázquez, who with his incredible game of mirrors in Las Meninas was able to show how the painter looks at his own painting from the inside the canvas, turning upside down the perception of realistic painting. And I hope he will have time to dwell on Picasso's concept of painting as a labyrinth. Finally, Alka Pande, will be speaking from the stance of Indian aesthetics, keeping in mind how the rasa theory becomes a backbone in understanding of traditional Indian art, and dwelling also in the seminal concept of rasa nubhuti, or the Indian concept of aesthetic experience. So, if you have any question, please use the chat to convey the questions, because we'll have a session with the audience at the end. We will be able to discuss the points that we'll be raising here. I would like to say that this session, Abhay will start, Javier will go second, and Alka will close this session. We have 10 minutes for each of us, and I would like to introduce a little bit more formally Abhay Sardesai. Abhay has been the editor of Art India, the premier art magazine of India, since November 2002. Under his editorship, the magazine has developed a culture studies-oriented approach and has become more interdisciplinary in his theme-based explorations. He has been visiting faculty in aesthetics at the Department of English, University of Mumbai, and has several posts and teachers at various institutions. He writes in English and translates from Marathi, Konkani, and Gujarati. And he has written widely on art and literature and read from his work at various places, including the University of Princeton, the University of Cambridge, and Mumbai University. Abhay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you, Alka, and thank you, Javier. It's a pleasure to be part of this August panel. I'm going to be very breathless in the way I'm going to talk because we have only 10 minutes each. so one needs to fit the form, as they say. Now, to take off from what Oscar just said, I would like to begin by drawing, and quite serendipitously, because I'm talking about a Spaniard, from the extraordinary story Pierre Menard, author of the Quixote, by the Argentinian Borges, probably the most radical writer of the 20th century with James Joyce. The hero of the story has recreated Cervantes' epic brick by brick, word by word, experience by experience, and has still managed to better it and exceed it in merit. How has this reproduction to cock a snook, at Benjamin come to outpace the original? If one were to jump out of one's skin and review this piece by Borges, offered incidentally also as a kind of an exegesis, one would know that there probably is an important reason why Menard's version is better than the original. The world around the text has changed, and the reader who reads the text has also changed with the transformed world. He now collects, shepherds, interacts with echoes that are part of his inheritance. They are clearer and richer than the voices themselves. They are the voices. They are no longer the echoes. The perception of the work of art depends thus upon how we let the word world in. To crack a joke at the expense of Rumi, what wounds we bear that allow the light to enter us. To use an expression not in fashion any longer, the experience of apperception, or a more self-conscious reconstitution of an experience that relates to our earlier histories, creates the possibility among a clutch of other faculties of this act of interpretation, the act that Mena has perfected in a certain way. The map has become the land, to refer to yet another of Borges' marvelous stories. The legitimacy of art criticism is thus dependent on the conviction that the interpretation carries. Born out of the triangulating intentions of the artwork, the writer, and the artist. This is one's act of meaning making presented through the channel, the agency of a language. The art of generating a cogent interpretation is also the art of cultivating the right distance and the right intimacy with the work of art. Looking at the work as a mobile system of signs that carry with them associative memories and histories, overstated and subterranean, is something that every writer needs to keep in the back of his mind. The trick then is really to acknowledge your impression and then progressively deepen it and invest it with some.
Dear Abhay, can you increase the volume? We have some slight problem with the sound. Perhaps you could, people are not able to listen properly. If you can increase the volume, all will benefit. Thanks.
Can you hear me now?
A little better.
Okay, okay.
Please? Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Slightly better, but if you can increase a little bit more, it will be.
Oh, I guess this is the maximum. Let me just see if I can. All right. I'm sorry, I can't seem to increase it anymore.
So perhaps if you can come closer to the mic.
Yes. I'll do that.
Okay.
All right. So the art of generating a cogent interpretation is also the art of cultivating the right distance and the right intimacy with the work of art. Looking at the work as a mobile system of signs that carry with them associative memories and histories, overstated and subterranean, is something that every writer needs to keep at the back of his mind. The trick then is really to acknowledge your impressions and then progressively deepen them and invest them with some scars so that a cultivated, a more elaborate response can be articulated. The art of interpretation is also the art of respecting the context, of historicizing relentlessly to understand the force fields within which we exist, create, and consume. There is also a caveat here. One should also know where to draw the limits. Otherwise, there is every chance that your response will balloon into an overinterpretation that will impress with its burden of knowledge, but not illuminate with the lightness of insight. I'm reminded here in passing of this marvelous book of essays by Susan Sontag in the 60s, where she argued against dry and hyper academic interpretations and urged writers to preserve the magic that the layered artwork holds within its folds. What one looks for honestly in acts of interpretation then is a sense of fullness, though one knows that it can only be partial. Acts of interpretation are premised on acts of writing or acts of speaking, and so rely on the scope, the frame, the composition of these processual acts. When should description thicken? When should it thin? And when should an argument veer towards an illustration? Are among the key questions that the interpreter is assailed by. Descriptions and analysis are often translatory in character. They reimagine an experience in diverse vocabularies and distinct registers. To be aware of what gets lost in the process is a significant move that keeps the critic on his toes as he tries to verbalize, capture, compress an aesthetic experience so as to recreate and relay the effects in a manner that does justice to their status, intensity, and weight. Henry James spoke of how every good story was both a picture and an idea. An act of aesthetic judgment thus partakes of other similar and dissimilar acts of criticism. What is vital is not to get caught in the tyranny of the category. This does not mean that a painting should not be seen primarily as a painting. No. Every work of art carries a code of how it ought to be assessed, to rephrase Kant. What I mean is, categories often harden like arteries and exercise an inordinate influence on our intellectual and social lives. It would be wise and useful when you write to also examine the nature of the propositions, their speed and slowness, their relevance and histories, so that there is a possibility of free taxonomizing, the possibility of pleasure in creating new knowledge. In our part of the world, there are very few forums for independent art writing to be published. Apart from Art India and a few other places that support criticism as an initiative, art writing is supported mainly by galleries, artists, and museums. Where the catalog essay is the is the king of forms, to say, the nature of critical writing has turned. It has become collusive, explanatory, even decorative, and involving acts that that are collaborative and not always contestatory. This is not to deny the fact that some of the best writing on art that has come out of South Asia has been in the form of the catalog essay in its various avatars. But my question is, why can't we have a critical review as a catalog essay? Though this might work as a thought or social experiment, the market will never countenance it. There are not many digital ventures that take an anti-establishmentarian position. But in a context, and we all know, we're all aware of this, where artists and gallerists and writers all suffer from and are at the receiving end of this rising tide of censorship and bogus hurts and intolerance, the idea of us and them, the artist versus the critic, does not always feel convincing. I began this short presentation as a provocation that lightly touches on pressing issues of understanding art. To extend this provocation and bring it to a cusp, may I end by asking a question. Can we consider the art critical text as an autonomous entity, only partially dependent on the artwork? Boris Groys talks of how naked an artwork looks without text, can we then arrive at a situation where the text looks, if not fully, at least partially clothed without the images? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ajay, for starting this conversation
Thank
with a
you.
really, really interesting topic about criticism, about the construction of the art itself, with the text attached to it. And well, we'll have time to discuss.
Sure.
Sometimes we have the impression that some works of art, especially contemporary art, they are more interesting at the text they generate than at themselves as artifacts, if I can be ironic. So Javier, I would like to introduce the next speaker. Javier Barón. Since 2003, he has served as senior curator of 19th century painting of the National Prado Museum, the famous Spanish museum at Madrid. He completed his doctorate in art history in 1989 with an extraordinary award from the University of Oviedo, where he was professor in 2011. He was a fellow at the Clark Art Institute of Williamstown, Massachusetts. In the Prado, he has prepared an organized exhibition on Turner, Fortuny, Renoir, and Sorolla, as well as others dealing with the diffusion of the art of the masters, such as El Greco in the contemporary painting. He has also dedicated a book to this theme, Greco et le Moderne, published in Paris, and in 2017, he was named Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres de la République Française. Thank you, Javier, for being here from Madrid. I was very fortunate to know him a few years back in Morocco, where he presented an incredible presentation on this Spanish painter, Fortuny. So the floor is yours. We're waiting to hear you. Thanks, Javier.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the Bihar Biennale and Dr. Alka Pande, her director, for the kind invitation to be here. I am honored also to share this panel with her, with Abhay Sardesai, and with my friend Oscar Pujol. Thank you very much. Diego Velázquez, considered the best painter in the 17th century, was not really known by the international public until the 19th century. The main part of his work was displayed in the Royal Palace, Madrid, and from its opening in 1819 in the Prado Museum. Nevertheless, very few people visited the museum until the decade of 1860, when the railroad allowed a relatively rapid and easy travel from Paris to Madrid. Apart from the Prado, some Velázquez's paintings were in the Spanish gallery of Louis-Philippe d'Orléans, exhibited in the 1830s in the Louvre galleries. And several works were also in England, where the appreciation for the painter firstly arose out of Spain. The coincidence of the accessibility to the Prado in the 1860s and the triumph of realism in painting was the origin of the interpretation of Velázquez in an strictly realistic way. Due to the extraordinary ability of the painter, this topic has persisted until now. The Spanish painter was supposedly the master whose aim was the perfect representation of the real world. In the 19th century, the rediscovery of Velázquez and the Golden Age Spanish school was coincident with the rediscovery of Rembrandt, Van Rijn, and the Dutch school of the same period. Both painterly traditions, while so different, provided the basis of the realistic trends to artists such as Courbet and the first Manet. More than Rembrandt, Velázquez was appreciated for his ability to represent the spontaneity of the gesture, the quality of the atmosphere, the sense of a profound individuality of his sitters, and the sensation of a real presence of them. Besides, in some works, such as Las Meninas or the Weavers, the space of the painting seemed to prolong the space of the spectator himself, and thus to convey a sensation of real presence of the represented people. Apart from this, the landscape played a very important role in the way that the 19th century visitors read the painting. Most part of them knew realist and impressionist painters. This brought them to see in Velázquez a precedent of both movements. Furthermore, the paintings by Velázquez were compared to photographs in visual terms, but they were much more appreciated because they were not still images. They conveyed a sense of living nature, where everything seems to be alive. The lack of rigorous historical studies on his work until the end of the century favored that certain paintings of the 17th century were considered as painted by Velázquez, even though they were made by his atelier or even by other artists. Therefore, some painters such as Delacroix and Manet studied and copied as if they were Velázquez some works made by other artists. This kind of misunderstanding was frequent until the 20th century. Visitors discovered in the Prado a sort of unknown treasure where the best painters of the Venetian, Flemish, and Spanish school could be found. And the most precious gem was precisely Velázquez, whose masterworks were showed in all their splendor in a few rooms. The different displays of the works by Velázquez took relevance in the perception by the public. In the 1870s, the best works of all the artists in the Prado were gathered in the room 12 in the very axis of the building, being transformed into a museum inside the museum, equivalent to the Salon Carré in the Louvre. But in 1899, the celebration of the third centenary of Velázquez's birthday resulted in a major exhibition in the Prado, where all his works were assembled in this same main room. After that, Velázquez always occupied this space, sometimes sharing it with other great artists like Vermeer in 2003 or Goya in 2004, but only in temporary exhibitions. This allowed a better perception for the public. The case of Las Meninas, reputed as one of the best paintings in the world, was special. Due to the complexity of its spatial conception, in the 1970s was exhibited in a room without any other work, isolated with the light coming from the left, the side where Velázquez, who is in front of us, received the light from the windows in the painting, and with a mirror installed on the wall of the back, the painting proposed an enigma to the spectator and an invitation to decipher it. At the same time, this display involved the visitor and forced him to search for his own interpretation. This display is related with the interpretation in favor of the autonomy of the work of art as Foucault and In the Order of Things, 1966, and the structuralism affirmed. This lecture was also the equivalent to the 44 interpretations of the painting by Picasso. Nevertheless, this kind of display seemed rhetorical, and the painting returned to preside the room 12. It was carefully presented on tissues or embroidery that favored an appreciation of something precious, but even this resulted a little artificial. The painted wall was finally preferred. Thus, Las Meninas, surrounded by other works of the same period by Velázquez, can be appreciated without any other stimuli. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Javier. It's been really intriguing and really, you know, this game of mirrors. And instead of commenting, if you allow me a small part of this game of mirrors, I will show here Las Meninas, which is in my room, it's a reproduction we have from El Prado here. Anyway, I think it's very interesting. I think we'll have time to comment more on this incredible painting, which you have seen. The author is there. We see the painting also itself from behind, and we see this intriguing figure at the end opening at the threshold of that door, which is really, really important. Also thrilled to learn that the discovery of Velázquez was also the discovery of the Museum El Prado, as you said, in the 19th century. Thanks very much. We'll come back to it. Now I would like to give the floor to our last speaker in this session, which is our host also, Alka Pande. I would like to say that I had the privilege to know Alka about 12 years back when we opened Instituto Cervantes in New Delhi, and that she was the first curator for an exhibition in the Cervantes. You will remember, Alka, when we still didn't have even our exhibition hall ready. So thanks very much. I would like to say that Alka Pande is an art historian and curator with postgraduate degrees in history and history of art, followed by a PhD in art history and postdoctorate in critical art theory at the University of London. She has authored numerous books and curated many national and international exhibitions. She is a recipient of the Charles Wallace Award, Knight of the Order of Arts and Letters by the French government, and also the Australian Indian Council Special Award L'Oréal Paris Femina Woman, and also the Amrita Sher-Gill Samman. Currently, Dr. Pande is a consultant art advisor and curator of the visual art galleries in the Indian Habitat Center, New Delhi. So the floor is yours. We are looking forward to listen about this wonderful theory of rasa aesthetics.
Thank you, Oscar, for the generous introduction and your friendship. I'm delighted to be in a panel with two very thoughtful people. My friend Abhay, who laid the kind of tune to the seminar by talking about the whole perception of art through a critical discourse, through a theoretical discourse, which is so important, particularly when we think of the understanding of art as a viewer, as a connoisseur, as a rasika. Because I'm going to be talking, of course, from the point of view of Indian aesthetics only, and within Indian art, you cannot be a rasika or a connoisseur if you do not have some knowledge of theory. I really enjoyed listening to Javier and Velasquez, one of my favorite painters, and I'm very privileged to say that I've seen the painting at close quarters. I've visited the Prado a couple of times at least, and it's an honor to have you on our panel and have a voice from the inside of the museum talking to us. Um, with my friend Oscar, who's already a great Sanskrit scholar, talking of the rasa theory is even more meaningful for me because there's somebody who will, have a resonance to the theory of rasa in the appreciation of art. And the rasa theory actually emanated and started from the natya shastra, the fifth ved, as we call it, where the every aspect of arts was embedded. The theory of rasa, which is the basis for the appreciation of traditional Indian arts, comes from a text of dramaturgy itself, is a pointer to showing that how we look at visual arts from the lens of performing arts, or how do we look at performing arts from the lens of visual arts. I would love to begin with a particular shlok of Bharat from the Natya Shastra, where he says, Yatho hastato drishtiti, Yatho drishtito manaha, Yatho manatato bhavaha, Yatho bhavastaho rasaha. Where the hands go, the eyes should follow. Where the eyes go, the mind should follow. Where the mind goes, the emotions are generated. Where the emotions are generated, sentiment arises. So when we, as viewers, stand in front of an object of art, these are the various things which go into our mind. And I am showing 5 images from traditional Indian art where I want to, showing these images, I want to really express first my own understanding, and secondly the perception of art from a very, very Indian perspective, a perspective which is very much part of the subcontinent, where I look at the transformation of rasa, which is emotion, which is juice, which is essence, to the anubhuti, to the ingestion of that rasa. So can we, Ayushi, begin with the Didarganj Yakshi? I'm beginning with the Yakshi, which is very much present in the museum itself. This is one of the most beautiful images and the pride of place of the Bihar Museum. So I wanted to show this particular gorgeous Yakshi, which embodies really the close to perfect standards of feminine beauty of pre-modern India. If you look at the image itself, it's in a beautiful polished stone, 5'2". She has a voluptuous body, full bust, slender at the waist and wide at the hips, typical childbearing hips. And what you see here are the prescribed modes of what was Indian beauty. It was not the flat washboard kind of size 0 of today, but here you have the 3 folds in her body, in her lower stomach, which is very, very beautiful. And it is one of the prescribed norms of beauty. This is known also as a Grivatrivali, which is the which first we look at the neck. There are lines on the neck she has, which is called the Grivatrivali, which is the 3 fold lines on the neck. And what I was talking about, the 3 folds on the lower abdomen, it's called the Katyavali, folds of flesh at the waist. And what is very, very striking about this statue is after we've looked at the entire body, you see there is a kind of unabashedness about her own form, though she's stooping a little, where some people like to say it's with humility, but I would like to say it is with the weight of her own breasts. But she stands in a very graceful way, completely at ease with her body. Her smile is elusive yet hauntingly sweet. And what you see is that she's in a kind of a posture of Tribhanga, where the weight is not balanced on 2 feet, which is actually Samabhanga, but it is based in a S curve, which highlights the beauty of the female form. Next, I want to show you, because we are in Buddha's land, I am showing you two images from the life of Buddha. One is, both are from Ajanta, 3rd century before the Common Era. This is the, no, this is later. I'm sorry, this is a later image. This is in the Ajanta caves. It's a reclining Buddha, the statue which represents Buddha lying down. It represents the time when he is actually about to enter into another world through his last illness. So this is the supine body where sublimity, where quietude, and one of the rasas, because in the rasa theory, there are supposed to be 9 rasas, 8 which were done by Bharat himself when he speaks of Shringar, which was the Rasaraj, the erotic, Hasya, the comic, Karuna, the pathetic, Raudra, the furious, Veera, the heroic, Bhayanak, the terrible, Bibhasta, the odious, Adbhuta, the marvelous. Later, we know that the 9th rasa was added, which was Shanta. And here you see Shanta rasa, the quiescent, which is accepted as part of the Navarasa theory. And in the Shantarasa, you see how Buddha is moving to another life. Next, I'm going to show you the image of the Avalokiteshwar Padmapani. This is a statue, this is a painting which is where a large, where it actually shows you the kind of painting, the frescoes which were done in the walls, the cave paintings, which are so much part of the Indian sacred tradition. And in Buddhist art, you see a lot of it. You see a lot of them in the caves of Bhimbhetaka, but they were different, done much earlier. Here you see the anthropomorphic forms of Buddha. And here you see that there is the Avalokiteshwar, one of the forms before he attains Buddhahood, the Avalokiteshwar holding a painting, a lotus in the hand, which is one of the icons of Buddha, which is a symbol of peace, which is also the symbol of knowledge, where one of the shlokas of Buddhist thought is Om Mani Padmeham. Next, I want to show you, of course, then I quickly jump to the medieval period, to the 17th century of the Common Era, a beautiful image of the dying Inayat Khan, painted by an artist called Balchand, a very, very close associate of Jahangir in his court. This is a watercolor painting, and what you see here is an official in the court of Jahangir, who was addicted to opium, and you see his emaciated body waiting for his death, addicted to opium, addicted to wine. And this is one of the beautiful masterpieces of miniature painting of the Mughal period. And what you see here is an unusual image of a man dying. Dying images were not part of the Indian painting tradition. They were all about Ananda or Paramananda or unity with Godhead. And most of the paintings of the till the medieval period were all about the spiritual. And you will always see that the perfect bodies were made in a suprahuman form, and that is why all the gods that you will see are made in the image of man. But here you see the skeletal image with the rib cage exposed, his hands like claws, his legs hidden under the cover of his coverlet, and the emaciation becomes even more exaggerated against the superposition of soft bolsters and pillows against which he is laid. What you see here is that we as viewers become a witness to this absolute, emaciation of the human form. And it is like Jahangir is commissioning a person to trace what addiction can do to the body, which also talks of the condition of his eating habits. So it is actually a manifestation of the process of dying, with which Indians are constantly, even in their lifetimes, are always besotted with, that whole thing, preparing for the life after death. And I want to end with a more buoyant, with a more beautiful image, which is that of a naika. These naikas, these are classical paintings which depict really the 8 naikas, the ashtanaikas. Here I'm showing you the Abhisarika naika. This is from the miniature tradition. And what you see, the Abhisarika naika is one who goes to meet her lover, who's walking through a dark forest full of snakes and other monstrous creatures. Sometimes even the thunder breaks over her head. Sometimes she's drenched in rain. Yet she walks resolutely and without fear, driven by her passion and conviction. Here we see her gingerly lifting her skirt to step over a puddle. She barely glances at the golden anklet she has lost in the grass, which you see behind, and she doesn't even hide her face. So what you see here is Shringar, the rasa of Shringar. And what you see in the rasa theory is that the true aesthetic object does not simply stimulate the aesthetic sense. The work attempts to stimulate the imagination through the senses. And as the aesthete rises from the level of sense to that of imagination, he reaches the second level of the aesthetic experience. The new world is his own creation. In it, he meets with the dramatic personality that is a focal point of the whole. It is the ideal realized. And therefore, I would go back to Indian secular writing, particularly to Sanskrit writing, all the aestheticians who've written about, particularly about beauty, what I call is Saundarya Shastra. In the Saundarya tradition, it is Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. That what is Satya, what is true, is beautiful. Satyam is Shiva. That what is true is Shiva, the primordial God, and Shiva is beautiful. So you see, it is, and Shiva is also associated with Nirguna. He's normally associated without really a physical body. So what you see is the abstraction of Shiva, and that truth is beauty. We actually come to that through the metaphor of this great primordial Lord Shiva. So in conclusion, I would like to just give my own interpretation that an aesthetic experience in its final stages really belongs to the level of Vyatarika, Turiyatika, where all objectivity merges in the subconscious. And the subject, the self, shrines in its Ananda aspect. So it is Rasanama, rasa meaning the act of relishing. So when we look at a work of art, what are we doing? We are inhaling, we are imbuing, we are ingesting rasa, and in the rasa, we are relishing the artwork. To unmute yourself.
Yes. So I was saying thanks very much, Alka, for this inspiring talk. It was really wonderful, your choice of images and words, to see from Didar Ganjakshi to Avalokiteshwar, and very impressive the Inayat Khan painting because as we all know that representation of death was a kind of taboo in all other Indian art. And it strikes me, it makes a resonance with Javier's paintings of the death soldier, although in a very different style, make for a beautiful conversation between both types of art, and well, Inayat Khan was still alive, but unlike the soldier, but very interesting.
This goes to show that art is universal, human emotions are universal, whether it is in Madrid or it is in the caves of Ajanta or it is Abhay in Mumbai. We're all speaking of beauty.
Saying so, Alka, I want to remind you that Abhinavagupta put this universal foundation of art because the 8 sentiments of rasas, he said, are common to all human beings. Everybody loves, everybody feels hate, everybody loves, everybody, and feels terror and disgust. So he gave a very objective theory of art and having this commonality of sentiments. I don't know how much time we are left, whether to go directly. You tell me, Alka.
I think we have 8 minutes left. Perhaps you should directly ask the questions, Oscar. We've talked enough. Is that okay, Abhay?
I think so. I have here one question to all panelists. I have a couple of questions, and you can answer, each one of you or whatever. Say, what is the importance of art in ethnic identity? Who will take that? Abhay?
Okay. Well, I mean, art is pretty well-known part of our larger cultural inheritance. And it is both local and extra-local. So Velázquez is as much our artist as he is a Spanish artist. And Tagore is both Bengali and Indian and Asian and international. So the model really to understand ethnic identity and art is to probably look at the image of widening circles, a Venn diagram with the radius that's constantly expanding.
Thanks very much. Anybody would like to make any comment on ethnicity and art?
Yes.
I think okay.
Javier?
Okay, no, Alka, please. Okay. Alka.
Okay. Well, for me, every ethnic community has its own expression. They express themselves. If you look particularly at indigenous art and you look at the art, they are so influenced by nature, by the environment they have, by their local gods. But the sentiments are universal. It's about love. It's about conflict. It's about environment. It's about ecology. And whether it's an indigenous artist from Central India and Madhya Pradesh, or it's an indigenous artist from Inuit art from Canada, or it is the Aboriginal art from Australia, they all have their ethnic markers of their identity. But I would just say it reeks and speaks of a universal spirit of a sustainable environment. So that is the way I'd look at ethnicity and art.
Javier, a few comments?
Yes, the art is definitely important in ethnic identity because ethnic is related to the very origin. And the sources of the art deal with the origin, the myth of the origin and its recuperation through the memory. Mnemosyne, the mother of the muses, in the very center of the art, in the very origin from Greece.
Thanks very much. Thanks. I hope that's been enlightening. And let's come to another question, which I think is very relevant to today's world. And basically it says, what is the importance of handmade art in this digital era? Who will like to take it? If you are brief,
Abhay. He's looking at all this. He's run an art magazine. He's up to date with everybody.
I just feel that one is constantly talking categories, and whether it's craft, art, or art and craft. And as I said in my presentation, one needs to constantly renegotiate these categories. So to actually create this kind of a hierarchy, which has been ossified traditionally, art above craft, is something that needs to be examined again and again, over and over again. So in that sense, I would really like to propose that one should, as artists, as critics, constantly interrogate, these propositions, and not arrive at any easy equations.
Thanks. Javier, any
Yes.
comment? You are a concern.
Yes, in my opinion, handmade art will be ever important and significant and meaningful. Precisely, there was the hand, the part of the body which allowed to progress from the beginning of the mankind, and this ability was the origin of the development of the mind of the man. No? So I think the handmade art is strictly related to all the developments of the art, even though we have entered now in a digital era.
Thanks. Yeah, the hand was there in the beginning, right? I think. Okay, let's go to our next question, which it touches Abhay, and it's been partly framed already before. And it is, do you think that but anybody can answer, it's not just Abhay. Do you think that the interpretation of artwork can sometimes become more important than the work of art itself?
Yes, it's a very vexatious kind of area that we entering. Well, ideally, one should have the possibility of the artwork and its exegesis or its interpretation as being complementary to each other, and we should ideally look at both of them collaborating to create the possibility of meaning, and for sort of facilitating the process of signification. But historically, one finds that a lot of post-conceptual art uh, is hinged on interpretation and on a variety of textual ways of understanding the actual artwork. So there are moments when the pendulum swings to one end, and there are moments when the art is self-explanatory, and the art can speak easily and clearly to the viewer. And there are times when the art requires a voice over, or an explanation.
Perhaps we could go beyond categories and say that the text on art becomes art itself.
Yes,
And
yes,
the original object of art, it's a text, commenting on that
absolutely.
text.
That's how I ended my
In a
presentation.
very Borges way, as you also
Yes.
quote Borges, that great Argentinian writer.
Yeah.
We have still another question, and perhaps Alka would like to take, or any one of you, how the importance of art changes according to architecture. Relation between art and architecture, how a certain piece of art inserted in an architectural context may change completely. Actually, Javier already hinted that when Las Meninas was in one room and then it was changed to another room, no? So what is the relations of art and the changes according to architecture?
You're talking of spatial spaces, right? You're talking of space. So it depends also where it is situated. If it is situated inside, say, a church or a temple, that same piece of artwork can become sacred. You bring it into a more secular space, it can completely change its meaning, and it can be very much part of the architecture and design of a living space. So I think architecture becomes important. The context changes with architecture, and architecture is about space and about environment. So if you are going to place a sculpture outdoors, then the artwork can be also interactive, which may not be so feasible in a smaller one bedroom in a place. So if you are making a kinetic sculpture, it will may work better in an outdoor space. So I think it's all about context, materials, and space. They go hand in hand.
Thanks very much. I don't know if Javier would like perhaps to make a comment or
no, only
close. If this will be the last comment, there are no more questions because we are. But please, Javier.
Yes, in my own experience as a curator in the Prado, I am sure that a work of art transmits different things in different architectures, even though if they are museums, all of them. No, the same work of art tells us different things in a museum in America. Or in a museum done in a museum in Europe or India or another part of the world. But even in the same museum, as we have seen, this masterpiece, Las Meninas, changed absolutely of meaning and if you change the context of the room where it was installed. So this is the condition to be alive of the work of the masterwork. No, the masterwork is able to say very, very different things and a lot of things in different places.
Thanks very much. There are many more questions coming in, but I cannot take them as the next session is there. So please remain with us during this wonderful seminar and keep the questions also for the next speakers. Thanks, Javier. Thanks, Abhay. Thanks, Alka. It's been really a wonderful panel, and we hope to continue.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.